All right, hello, welcome back. My name is Myre, and this time around we're going to be checking out SCL, which is all about Star Citizen 3.14. This is going to be another long-form discussion, so sit tight. Thanks for watching, everybody who's live on Twitch, but if you're not, welcome YouTubers as well. Let's get right into it, shall we?
Hi, everybody. Welcome to Star Citizen Live, all about Alpha 314. I'm your host, Jared Huckabee. And if you've never seen Star Citizen Live before, watch another episode, figure out what it's all about. We're just jumping into it this week. We have three esteemed guests, three directors emeritus joining us on the show to discuss all things Alpha 314. Starting immediately to my left, from your perspective, we've got Star Citizen Art Director, Mr. Ian Leyland.
Hey everyone, hey Jared.
Down in the corner, we got Angel Eyes,
Angel
Star
Eyes.
Citizen Live game director, Mr. Tod Pappy,
Hello.
and
Nobody puts baby in the corner.
nobody puts baby in the corner. And directly beneath me, the man who props me up, vehicle director, John Crewe. John, how you doing?
John Crewe.
I'm doing good, thanks.
All right, so we are talking all things Alpha 314. We're going to jump right into it today. We put a question thread up at the beginning of the week. We collected questions from the Star Citizen backers, let them vote up which questions they wanted to see
I
answered
asked
most.
quite
We've got
a few
collection of
questions.
them
We'll see if any of mine were asked.
Gathered for our ship people and our gameplay and design people and our environment people, so we can cover quite a lot. Right off the bat, let's start with something for you, Ian, here. Obviously, the volumetric clouds were a big thing. People have been asking about them in just this show almost every single week for the last year and a half, just no matter what the topic was.
Pretty much, yeah.
Are any of the other Stanton planets and moons getting volumetric clouds with this V1 that comes out in Alpha 314?
So the short and disappointed answer is no, but if we
This was my
break
question,
down
I think.
maybe why. Originally, Costin and the team were prototyping on a moon or a smaller planet as a starting off point, but it became clear that we just needed to focus on Crusader itself, focus the tech development on that, and just specifically look at that just for this release. So, it was for a particular reason to just focus on one, just because when you're above the clouds or going in the clouds, you can just focus on that. Also, the scale, right? The scale is a unique thing. Also, like part of the conversation as well, like as soon as you put in clouds on a planet or a moon, there's a lot of additional factors that you're going to need to consider, right? Like the occlusion that you'd get from the sun. So there's just a lot of extra stuff that we need to kind of consider. Yeah.
So it's a slightly disappointing answer, but it's not one that I wasn't expecting, really, with, again, how they mentioned the scale and scope of Origin compared to, like, another planet, because I think that it's a very unique thing, what they're doing with the gas giant and what they would want to do with, like, the planets, but it can't be too much sooner, I suppose. But yeah, we'll be getting fog and smog and all other sorts of stuff on Hurston soon, I hope, anyway.
So unfortunately, not for 314, but it's something we're looking at for the future.
It's coming.
Yeah, I mean, like, to see the tech already in with Origin, I think that, I think that's basically kind of been the thing people have been worrying about, is like, will they ever actually get it done? So I think that much has been done already. Hopefully we will see all that other stuff soon,
As we develop the tech further and all that good stuff. Todd, for Ninetales Lockdown,
Oh, yes.
we know from our segment with Ben Dorsey on ISC a couple weeks ago that players can choose to help the Ninetales or help Crusader security on either side of this PvP kind of focused or PvP-centric dynamic event. Is that a choice that you get locked into? Or will you be able to change your mind, play both sides, flip back and forth?
This was another one of my questions.
Do one time and then do another thing another time. How does that choice actually manifest?
So the choice actually manifests itself based off of if you have a crime stat or not.
Okay.
And So if you have a crime stat, then you'll get the Nine Tails missions. If you don't, then you'll get the Crusader missions. If you get a crime stat while you're in the Crusader missions, then you'll get kicked out, and you'll be given the option for the Nine Tails missions.
Right.
And then obviously, if you have a crime stat and you get rid of it during that time, then you should be able to have the Crusader missions.
But what if you get a crime stat and then you blow up a Nine-Tails ship? Will the Nine-Tails still be, all right, whatever, we'll let you off this time. You only killed our best friend, David. But I guess we'll see.
There's not a checkbox or some
No,
weird piece of not diegetic UI.
It really is all based off your crime stat.
So in this current iteration, it has nothing to do with reputation then.
So you clear it, you should get Crusader. You have it, you should get Nine Tails.
Okay. John, the constellation Taurus is coming with 314, the last variant of one of our original 5 pledge ships. What the hell took so long?
What did take so long?
Does the constellation Taurus represent the gold standard for the entire constellation series of starships?
Short answer, no. So obviously the Taurus has been floating around for a long time. There's been many conspiracy theories about what we've been doing with it, and as I mentioned before in previous Star Citizen Lives, it was never going to be like a whole rework of the ships,
Okay.
the lineup. It's simply just spread over that amount of time because it's been a project that we've had on the back burner that we can just put someone on, and when we need to shift priorities, it's the easiest thing that we can pause, move those people on to something else, and then come back to. So it was only ever going to be adding the Taurus to the existing lineup, but that doesn't mean the constellations are all going to stay as they are. That's not the final version of the constellation. So
Right.
when we get to the gold standard pass for the constellation, then they will all have that pass we are doing currently on the Retaliator, where we're making sure the metrics are correct, making sure the components are in the right place at the right height for accessibility. Because if you look at the constellation at the moment, I think there's multiple component hatches on the wall labeled quantum drive. Obviously, that's not the case. Connie doesn't have 2 quantum drives. That's just an art issue. So we'll be going through doing all that.
Yeah, there's a lot of redundancy with the constellation components and where they're listed on stuff.
Making sure everyone's favorite seat table combo actually works and you can fit in it, and doing something about the struts. So I know I said in the past that we would look to do something with the struts of the Taurus. We unfortunately
Celebrate the struts.
Yeah, we didn't have time to do the struts and update the pilot seat with all the new buttons that we require. So we did the pilot seat first, which people will see in 314, and then when we do the gold standard pass, we'll touch everything else.
Yeah. So essentially the Taurus is taking so long because the Taurus is the Taurus, and there's so many other ships that can do what it can do. And it's more like, we need to get this ship out. Let's put, like, Josh Coons on it, like, maybe for a week, and then he'll go and do something he needs to actually do to, like, push things along. So yeah, gold standard currently, I believe, on the roadmap. The Retaliator they mentioned is on as currently the only multi-crew ship currently on it. I feel like there's only one team doing gold standard stuff, so we'll likely see the next thing going on into it once they've done the Retaliator. The Saber is also on there, not the Raven, just a normal version of the Saber is also in gold standard. Same with the Argo MPUV, which has like Squadron 42 significance as well. So yeah, it's sad that we're not going to see much changing really with the Taurus, but again, also the Coney Taurus is like the cheapest or like the least valuable Star Citizen Connie model there is. So for it to have gold standard or anything else crazier than like, all the other ships now would have been kind of odd as well. But yeah, hopefully we'll see, the Connie get the love it deserves soon. It is an RSI ship. So, Chris Roberts isn't going to let it just be, the way it is, he's going to want his name attached to a ship that actually is good. But yeah, we'll have to wait and see.
Ian, folks who have followed the project for a while know that our planets and moons often have several biomes that blend into each other. With Crusader being a gas giant and an entirely new kind of planet, does it have biomes? And if so, what are they and how are they sorted?
A good question.
Let's see. In the traditional sense, biomes, no. Biome implies like it's a different asset pack. Ties into the flora and fauna that you'd expect there. But one interesting part of the development of Crusaders, one of the things that the tech allowed us to do is to have not a variety of visual design spread horizontally across the planet, but we have a variety of visual design spread vertically through. So
Okay.
on the video last night that went out, people could see a slight glimpse of the variety there.
Yeah.
So because it's texture driven, we was able to kind of design a format where, like on the very top, around where Origin is, you have some wisps above the player, that catches the light, that gives you that classic skybox vibe. But then if you go down one step below, we was able to create these kind of like canyons. We wanted to describe the effect of like wind. Wind is the unsung hero across everything to do with Crusader and Origin. It drives everything. So we wanted that feeling where like these winds have stretched the clouds. So you have a kind of a ravine. And then lastly, on the bottom, you can actually get into like a cavernous space, where you're completely enclosed in cloud, but it feels like you've gone down really, really deep. And then below that, it's the hard deck. From there on in, you're just going into clouds, and then that's where
We'll kill you.
we'll kind of limit the play space. So in a more traditional sense, no, but actually, I think yes. And in the future, Todd and I was discussing that we want that to tie into a variety of play space, a variety of gameplay experiences depending on that depth.
Okay. Well, that is pretty cool. Like to hear that they're thinking of different kinds of gameplay within the different depths of Crusader. They talked earlier before about this thing called, I believe, atmospheric density damage. So like your ship will have like a ADD rating where like, if it has a higher ADD like rating, you can go deeper into the clouds or whatever and survive there. But yeah, it's really cool to hear that like, instead of like having, what I thought like when I read the question was that like, Crusader exists as a gas giant. It has like bands or whatever. Maybe one band on it like has different coloration and maybe like has different things going on with it. Maybe when you are actually like planet side, those bands kind of become more or less one of the same. But it's cool to hear that like when you're like you described 4 different layers, right? So when you're in the topmost layer, you get that like really cool heaven vibe that's on Origin. When you go a bit lower, then things start to get a bit different. You're more like a windy canyon. Then you like get more encapsulated, and then of course you go into like the depths, and it's just like a peachy kind of cloud before you blow up. It's really cool. I can't wait to see what they do with it. Obviously, in terms of what different kinds of gameplay we can get there, they've mentioned space whales before, so maybe like in the search for the space whales and that kind of thing, that's one of the things that'll tie into that gameplay. It's cool to hear.
It's kind of like a 7-layer dip.
Hidden outlaw floating platform when?
Well, I think of like a submarine going down into a really deep area.
No, I said a 7-layer dip. We're going to go with that.
A what?
A 7-layer dip.
A 7-layer dip?
Just like that. The beans. They're the unsung heroes.
Oh.
A what?
Ian, do you not know what a 7-layer dip is?
I think this is an American thing.
I had a very sheltered childhood.
All right, moving along. John, a couple questions in the live chat about the 890 jump
That's an American thing,
issues.
okay.
Is there any joy, anything to look forward to in Alpha 314 RE that?
Wait, what cargo
Partial
issues?
joy, I guess is
What? Sorry.
All right, moving along. John, a couple questions in the live chat about the 890 jump
the goddamn
cargo issues.
Jump club.
Is there any joy, anything to look forward to in Alpha 314 RE that?
Okay, jump cargo.
partial joy, I
Thought I
guess is
misheard.
the answer there. So the bug is
Isn't
still
it
there.
the answer to so many things?
Yeah.
Partial joy.
Partial joy.
Apocalyptic changes and partial joy. Good.
Yeah, that's my catchphrase now. The main cargo grid on the rear ramp is still not being detected by the cargo system because it's an item in an item. I think a few other ships have that issue, but it really impacts the 890 because that's its primary amount of cargo. So that's still unfortunately not fixed. But we have actually we found an issue with the cargo in the front hangar where it wasn't actually putting on as much as it was supposed to be putting in there. The cargo, we'd put the right numbers in, but there was a little bit of proxy geo from the hull clipping in and stopping like rows and rows being added to the front. So whilst you're not going to have the full amount, there is a small bump in what you can actually use in the 890 and 314. I can't remember the number off the top of my head. I think maybe roughly double what it is at the moment.
That's still good, right? I don't know how much that is in terms of capacity, but yeah. The 890 Jump is a capital ship, right? And then it's a luxury touring ship. It's not a freight ship. I don't know who's out there who's like really wanting their 890 to do freight stuff. But yeah, I mean, like, it's not what was intended. So hopefully, you know, like, it'll get fixed eventually. But the amount of times you see this particular thing on is just too damn high. I'm over it.
Todd, what other in IC a couple weeks ago, we talked with Luke Presley about and Ed Fuller about a number of law system improvements that have come in 314. Some because of things we learned in Xenothreat, and some just things that we learned through normal everyday wear and tear and testing. Besides the new surrender mechanic, what other law system highlights come to mind? You don't need an itemized list of everything, but
I got an itemized list from Luke and team.
If you want to.
Removing trespass zones from all underground facilities to planets. So you were no longer receiving crimes for EMPing or interdicting the ship that you're using. So basically, you were getting it off of yourself, or if you EMP'd, then you got a crime stat for yourself. Destroying a party member's empty vehicle will no longer result in a crime. We have updated the prison code to interface or code entry interface and prevented it from resetting the code with incorrect attempts. Made a reduction in time to remove individual crimes when hacking. Crime for assaulting a security guard should no longer be given outside of a monitored zone. Knockouts will no longer kill. Fixed an issue where the players were receiving a crime stat for shooting a vehicle as it was destroyed, and then fixed an issue when falling into lower sections of prisons that would count as a escape attempt. And then the other big one that Luke said was basically adjusted splash damage. So in particular for like EMP and interdiction stuff, like if you've done more good than bad, then you shouldn't get penalized for it.
Okay. So that splash damage thing they talked about before, about how, like, if you're in a big fight and you're firing at a ship and you accidentally hit like the friendly NPC Idris, as long as you're hurting the other thing more than you are the Idris, then the Idris won't go oi and then, like, you know, tag you and bag you basically. So that's apparently being factored in for things like EMP stuff, so you can use an EMP around like an NPC, and if you know there's somebody else who's receiving the damage, it won't flag you as, you know, bad. I think the major takeaways from this that he mentioned here are just general bug fixes for things like bounty hunting, so you don't get a crime stat going into a bunker to stop somebody else. Hacking people, or not hacking people, but hacking your own crime stat being a bit faster is of course great, because it's been tiring having to do it for as long as you have to. And of course we are waiting on this new hacking gameplay that's going to be coming in for, I believe, 315 to change that up anyway. But yeah, like, all in all, some cool stuff there with the crime stat stuff.
Right. I know when we were talking before the IC, he was super excited about a lot. Well, as excited as Luke Presley gets, I can tell. It's like Jonku. I can tell when Jonku's excited. It's like you learn to spot the nuances.
The millimeter of
he was
facial
clearly very excited about a lot of the law system changes coming. Another question I thought was interesting. Can you talk about any ninja changes to 314?
Changes.
Something that doesn't usually appear on patch notes, or things like weapon or ship balance, or just.
Well,
okay.
I mean, considering I think last patch we fixed over 3,000 issues. So, and before that, another 3,000 issues. And now, again, with a lot of these things, we're creating them, you know, as we're building the features and building the content,
Right.
And then trying to squash them as much as we possibly can. So, one of the ones that I want to basically fix is the zoom out on the star map. So making sure that when you start the star map, it's actually zoomed out versus zoomed in.
Thank you.
Then from there, we're looking at trying to fix a lot of the AI issues, in particular, them standing on chairs. And the reason for that was it's not necessarily on the AI. It was basically the way that the actor was persistent, and so he would go to sleep when you zoomed out, and it's basically the AI would be unusable, and then as soon as it got woken back up, when you came back in and reloaded, it didn't know what to do. So those are things that I want to make sure we get fixed.
For 314?
And there, it's just we've outlined a crap ton of quality of life fixes that we always try to hit. But this patch, I was much more strict on what should be a live must fix and trying to force these issues in.
Do you think that's, obviously, I'm not asking for a date or anything, but being more strict like that, do you think that's likely to have an impact on when we go live?
When I say strict, it's basically calling out and saying, no, we have to fix this. So from there, it really is a conversation with the directors and the teams. But all I can really do with a lot of this stuff is call it out and say, hey, same with Bayer or our player relations or our player experience team, and as well as other directors and leads. And so we have that stuff called out, and then it's up to us to really go through and say, yeah, we can do this in this time, or this requires an underlying system to be fixed or adjusted, or we're currently working on that, so we're not going to fix it right now because it's a waste of time, as soon as that new feature goes live, kind of thing. So it's those constant balance changes that happen, within our development system. So, but I mean, for the changes and stuff like that, like John can tell you, like, I mean, even just for the missile mode, I think they've done one pass and then they expect to do multiple passes, for that. So, I mean, that to me is kind of ninja changes, that people would not necessarily see or know. Same with the AI and a lot of the mission stuff too. Like there was a lot of rework that Elliot did, for some of the base missions.
Okay.
But again, the player might not necessarily see those. So some of it's just quality of life, and hopefully, it just feels smooth and it's not immersive breaking, and then, so the player doesn't notice it.
Right. I mean, like, to touch on the AI on the bunkers and stuff, any changes at all would be really welcome. I mean, like, he doesn't necessarily make it sound like it's going to be something that you'll perceive, but as long as they actually work, because those bunker missions really suffer from the current state of the servers. But yeah, I mean, I'm hoping that, like, it's coming for 314, the stuff he mentioned, just because, when Jared was like, so you mean it's coming at 314? Tod used a lot of words instead of saying yes, so we'll see. It's more like he wants to prioritize the team to get those things like the star map zoom and stuff in, but whether or not they actually get it in for 314 is, like up in the air, because it's not like one of those hard and fast things that you can just fix, because it's not like you can say, hey, fix this bug, and then it happens the moment you say it. Like it has to be like worked on, thought about, that kind of thing first.
Gotcha. Ian, what was the hardest challenge the art team? What was the hardest challenge the art team faced when bringing Crusader to life as a gas giant? Let's do it for Crusader and for Orison, because those had to be two very different challenges.
All right. Turns out making a gas giant's hard, right? Yeah. Well, let's see. So we started off by seeing how far we could get with the current tech. I think the last time I spoke with you, Jared, we was like, okay, we'll see what we can do. Abuse the rules, see what we can happen. I think we got pretty far. We showed it to Chris, and Chris was like, nope, we're missing the volumetric clouds, right? So, the focus then turned into the volumetric clouds. But whenever you create something for the first time, it's always hard because it's the first thing. You've got to go through that process of trial and error. So, with something like the gas giant, instantly the scale was the hardest part. And for example, like the radius of Crusader was, I think it's about 7,500 kilometers radius, right? And for example, like Stanton 1's like 1,000, or one of the moons is maybe 300. So
That's bigger than Earth in real
it's
life.
considerably
Okay.
larger. So with that scale, and when the player flies in, you come up with a design, and then you fly into it, and you don't see anything move. So instantly, that scale became the first thing that became a concern. And then second is just, we've never made a gas giant before, and it's you can look at fantastic satellite imagery, but we wanted to do something that was a little bit different. Chris had a very specific look in mind for Crusader that we wanted to achieve. And remember, like I said, like that sort of feeling that wind has blown these clouds over the surface, so we wanted a particular look. So then the tech develops, and then by Carsten, and Seb did a fantastic job as our principal tech artist of being that communicator between the art team and the tech team, and translating what features we'd need and how the tech works. So like I said, there's a lot of trial and error there. But then, once you start doing look development, you start getting something. But there was one day, okay, it was like, cool, this is working. And then Jake, who's previously been responsible for the previous spacescape in the gas pockets and stuff in the game right now, and he just had a little play, right? He just was very curious. He took the tech, and then he tried something out, and instantly it was like, that's Crusader. He hit it. The man was talking about the layer in. He just tried something out, and we all looked at it. It was like, that's fantastic. So Seb kind of took it from there and stabilized it. But it was quite a difficult journey, because it was the first thing for the game, and it's brand new tech, right? So I kind of see it where where we are, where we were a few years back in terms of planets. If you look at how they've developed and grown and increased in fidelity, it might maybe give a good example of where we are right now with this new bit of tech.
It's cool to see that Ian and his team are really happy with what they've gotten with Crusader. So not that it will matter for a lot of people, but I would love to hear from Chris Roberts whether or not Origin as it is right now matches or meets up to his expectation and his initial brief of what he wanted that planet to be like in the first place. Just out of curiosity, because you have people who want something in one way, right? And I want to know if it meets or even exceeds what he wanted from it in the first place.
And then for Origin, this is a classic example of taking a concept art that you look of and go, oh, that's just going to be the best. That's the best. Like, Origin was always my favorite of the Stanton locations. Or I fell in love with Origin a long time ago. I looked at the concept art, and guess what? We put that block out in game, and it was like, this looks horrible. Horrible. Turns out a floating lattice work in the sky with thin struts doesn't translate well from concept art to game. So it tested us as a team. It tested us. But I think I speak with everyone on the team through hard work, passion, dedication, just trying ideas, trying things. What we ended up with is we're quite happy with.
Yeah,
I'm glad.
I remember, I sit in on those Tuesday reviews, every week, and I remember a year ago the first early tests of Origin and this lattice work that you were talking about, and going, I don't know how he's going to do that. That didn't look like it's working.
Yeah. It was a definite. Okay. We're gonna. This is like, we had to fight for every win on Origin. It was, although we came with the experience of making previous LZs and previous modular locations, it tested the team to the fullest. But I think they did a fantastic job.
Whenever I used to look the concept art for Origin and stuff, I always looked at it and It never happened. I mean, this is too out there, too different, too difficult, but they've done it. I mean, like, at least in the ISC, it looks good. I can't wait to see it. And also, like, what's cool about it is that now that they've done it here with Origin, it's awesome that, like, you know, now they'll have like the baseline to just like recolor it and make a gas giant somewhere else, you know, that doesn't necessarily have to have, you know, an Origin there, you know, even if it does, you know, like it can just use one of those platforms they already have, and, you know, bam, that you have it another location somewhere else. It's cool to see.
John, let's see. Does the missile operator mode, along with the guidance and control rework, mean that co-pilots are going to be able to aim and fire missiles in any or all of the ships in 314? What's the extent of this?
Another one of my questions, sorry.
I also understand that capacitors have changed a little bit since we talked about them in ISC, so maybe we want to jump into that as well.
Yeah. So missile-wise, the intent is, yes, that co-pilots can use them. Certainly,
Good.
From my testing personally in the Ivakati one, there are plenty of ships there that will. Pilot can be flying along using guns. Co-pilot can be there using missiles. So that really, probably for the first time, gives co-pilots something to do rather than just being sat there and looking at things. The intent is also for them to be able to control capacitors, but there is some sort of technical hurdles we're working through there. So I don't know if we're going to get that in for 314, but that's certainly the longer term goal. But missiles, definitely yes.
Okay.
In ships where there are co-pilot seats, you will be able to independently go into missile operator mode outside of the pilot and trade sort of control of these things.
Oh man.
To sort of touch on the ninja changes question as well earlier, people look at the missile operator mode is just a way to control missiles, capacitors, or it's just an extra layer. Those things have necessitated us to change and rebalance every single missile in the game, every single weapon in the game, all the ammo counts for every weapon, every single shield, the default loadouts for every ship, the hit points for every ship, the maneuverability of every ship. So they are huge, wide-reaching changes. So 314 is going to be a vastly different combat landscape to 313. And
it sounds like a true, like almost a full combat rework. I wouldn't say a complete one, but it does sound like they've changed. They're changing a lot, you know, like they said every single shield. Do you know like how many shields there are like for each size category? That's kind of ridiculous. But you know, like he hasn't even finished the sentence. But like, man, I'm kind of disappointed about like not being able to control the capacitor stuff from like, you know, the co-pilot seats and stuff. But the big question here is how the missile operator mode is going to be working for co-pilots, you know, especially with ships that have more than one co-pilot seat. With a hammerhead, makes sense. You got a pilot and a co-pilot. But when you have things like, you know, the Starfarer, where you have like, you know, several operator seats, or even the Freelancer MIS with the 3 operator seats, like which one controls the missiles? Can everybody control the missiles at the same time? Can you lock multiple people with multiple people in those seats? We'll have to wait and see, because it's a bit more complicated for them to answer, but or you to even ask that question. Like, we needed this information first, but we'll definitely have to do some sciencing when this comes out.
And obviously with things of that magnitude, they are going to be iterated on in future patches, because we're not going to get the balance right out the gate.
I couldn't imagine them to be able to do
magnitude
so.
of ships and component
possibilities
out there. Same for radar and scanning. So we have like this new HUD, missile operator mode, capacitors, radar and scanning, and then all these other balance changes. There's a lot of big features at work there in 314 that they're going to take a while to bed in, and the beauty of this project is that the people playing the game can help us dial that in, because there's only so many of us, there's only so many QA. Things will slip through. You guys are great at finding them in PTU, and hopefully we fix as many as we can before live.
Isn't it a good trade operator mode? So okay, so like one person can use it, then they can turn it off, and somebody else can. Like, yeah, that's cool. But yeah, awesome. I'm looking forward to seeing that work for sure. That sounds really cool. And yeah, technical hurdles could mean it can arrive in 314X. That's fair, yeah. But you know, like the next big release is like, you know, on the horizon. I was kind of expecting it then, but it could come like a month, 2 months down the line. That's all well and good, but I was just kind of hoping for it to be all one package.
And after I said it, I don't know why I combined the two because they had nothing to do with the part. You've covered the missiles and the
Wow,
balancing.
you're loud,
let's,
Jared.
let's talk about capacitors and how capacitors have changed. On the roadmap, we saw that they were rebranded as Power Management V2 and stuff like that. So,
Jared needs a compressor.
where is that system at now? What can people expect when it shows up on PTU?
So fundamentally, the base system is still there. Capacitors are a thing. We haven't got rid of them. They are there. But in the review process, we sort of looked at it all and went, capacitors are really just the new bit that's been added.
Mm-hmm.
What you're actually doing now is you are managing your power and your energy. Anyone that's sort of familiar with real world plane dogfighting or sim dogfighting, it's all about energy conservation and using that to your advantage. So what we've done is, rather than capacitors be this separate entity,
Mm-hmm.
we've merged them into the power triangle. So the power triangle in previous patches never quite worked how we wanted it to work.
Nope.
Or how players thought it worked.
Nope.
So
I still to this day don't know how that works.
give a very simple, quick answer for that. All the items on your ship wanted X amount of power.
Mm-hmm.
So the power plant would go fill them all up as much as it could first, based on a completely separate priority list to what's on the power triangle.
Okay.
And then the power triangle would dictate what's left over. So if your items had all the power they needed, moving the power triangle around did nothing for them anyway. It was sort of just a false advertising on you pushed all to thrusters, but if your thrusters had enough power anyway, it made no difference.
It's whatever, yeah.
That is completely gone now. So the power triangle in 3.14 directly controls the capacitor assignment. So you are dictating where this capacitor is expending the energy available to it. So if you put it in the middle, so if you want to play the game without capacitors at all, you can. You don't have to manage it. You can just leave it alone, fly as you did in 3.13. You'll still be able to partake in combat and do things. But if you come across someone who's actively managing it, you're going to be at a disadvantage. So it's there for giving players extra depth. And I can't remember what we showed in the ISC a while back about it, but it is the three states. So you have your boost, previously known as afterburner. So rather than gating your boost by heat, it's now gated by the capacitor. Heat is something we want to be a long-term consequence, not the limiting short-term consequence. Because if it's a short-term consequence, there is no long-term consequence for it, because you're having to get rid of that heat quick enough to allow you to get back into the gameplay. So heat is a long-term consequence now. The capacitors are the short-term consequence. So that controls how much boost you have and how quickly it can regenerate. On the weapon side, energy weapons now have essentially a regenerating magazine. So you can't just hold down your fire button and let them fire forever. They will fire, they'll deplete their magazine capacity, pause for a second, then regenerate, and the capacitor itself controls the speed of that regeneration. You can also turn on and off your energy weapons to increase the pool available to your energy weapons. So a good example would be, say, the Super Hornet, which has a lot of guns on it by default. At the moment, that will split the capacitor between all those weapons. So if you turn a few off, the ones that are left will have more and also recharge quicker. So you've got some trade-offs to make there.
Right.
And then the last one is shields. And shields sort of behave how they did previously, because they had that behavior built in where they would go down, pause, recharge, go back up again. But what we've done in addition to that, aside from all the rebalancing of the numbers, is all the fighters have bubble shields, which is something we used to have pre-Alpha 3.0.
So no faces on the fighters.
So you, rather than having 4 faces on your shield system, it is one all-encompassing shield face. So no matter what direction you are being hit from, it's all getting hit on one face essentially. And then large ships have the 4 faces, so you can manage your directionality, which you don't have to do in smaller ships. So yeah, it's still there. It's slightly rebranded because we wanted to sort of take the emphasis away from this new thing that's
I think that's false information, Darge.
being added
We don't
and
know.
put it onto you're managing the whole system of power rather than just this one little thing. So there's a huge amount there. There's a huge amount to play with. You don't have to play with it if you don't want to. If you find that side to come in, I just want to get in my ship and fly, that's fine. But for those combat players and PvP players, I think they're going to really enjoy it because there's lots of nuance there between.
Yeah, so much more to learn. So just to touch on what Darge says, see, Darge says number of emitters equal number of faces, 1 emitters for small ship. I don't believe that, just because with the Gattac Ryland has 2 emitters on its, it has 1 emitter, sorry, on its thing. The Ryland's a medium-sized ship, so you're saying that a big ship like the Ryland only has 1 shield face? I don't think so. So yeah, I don't think so at all, Darge. Especially since larger ships, well, actually, we don't actually know how many emitters those other ones do have, but yeah, I don't think that's how it's going to work. We'll have to wait and see until it comes out before we can actually make those judgment calls, Darge. But yeah, like what he's talking about here is exactly why I kind of wanted this to be a thing for the auxiliary seats going forwards, so that like when you're in these big fighting environments or whatever, and you have one person who's just worrying about like what's going on with your capacitors at the time, like, so when you do a strafing run and you deplete all your energy ammo or whatever like that, then you as a pilot can just worry about trying to revector and turn back to the enemy, whereas your friend can then go ahead and do what they need to do to like charge your weapons back up to full again and that kind of thing. We'll get that eventually. I just kind of was expecting that all to come in one go, but we're used to this now.
Do I stick it in the middle? Do I put it into the thrusters to recharge my boost quicker and then take it back out to put into weapons to do a big alpha strike and then take it back, put into shields? There's a lot of fun things there.
Yeah, so we actually covered the Ryland Q&A. We haven't posted onto YouTube yet, but by the time people watch this on YouTube, that'll likely be up. But we did actually check the brochure for the Ryland. We checked what they had to say about emitters and everything else, and there's a lot of conflicting information. So until things actually come out, and even after that, like, we'll have to wait and see what the actual, rule is when it comes to shield faces. Until then, we're all kind of lost.
Cool. There's a question in chat. Jared, can you make John Crewe laugh? When are we getting the... how about that Orison shuttle, John?
I agree too, but yeah.
Oh, that's not going to make me laugh. That's just going to make me angry.
Well, we're finally getting it, John? Yeah?
That's what I just heard.
God,
I talked to the artist.
His mic is so hot.
He was not up.
Not in the good way.
On the vehicle team.
I've got a John had a great ninja, ninja commit in for 314. I've got a slightly better one. A new high-tech payment terminal. The fine terminal? It's coming.
I covered that on ISC. I covered that in a sprint report in episode 314.03 this year.
I said to
this
Corey, now's the time. Let's get it in.
I can't tell if he's meaning.
I did it. Todd, is there any benefit to surrendering to law enforcement, such as like reduced sentencing or anything? Why?
So I don't mean to gloat or anything, but he's asked 4 out of my 5 questions so far, and I'm just feeling like maybe I should be like an interviewer or something.
Would you want to surrender as opposed to just fighting to the death?
It's basically laying the framework in the future. Now, no,
Okay.
Essentially you don't die, but in the future you won't die, as well as basically you won't lose as many things as you would have before.
Right.
So it is down to be done, but it's not there yet.
So it's just a framework thing for now. You don't actually get anything. But to go back to shield emitters and stuff, I do like this idea of like with the larger ships, like the capital ships, having a point on a ship for a smaller ship to actually go and focus on, as opposed to like, true David and Goliath kind of like just shooting anywhere and doing anything to it. It will make, in a big fleet battle scenario, smaller ships still have something to do and something to focus on, and also kind of make things more tactical for fleet gameplay, or even if you're only just like one big ship against like a fleet of smaller ships, because more or less where they're going to try and take out first before then trying to take on the rest of your ship. So it'll kind of give phases in a way to encounters like this, in Star Citizen, I don't know about dungeons or whatever, but like let's say your squadron against like an NPC Vandal kingship, it'll give an event or an encounter like that different kind of phases to them, because the first thing you want to do is take out those shield emitters before you can then do damage to the hull. If you've played like Star Wars Squadrons, I feel like that's probably where things are gonna go. You know, it's cool.
Okay. Will radar scanning and ping be affected by things like asteroids, terrain, or other obstructions?
So
This was my last question. He's asked all of them. Validation.
with the ping, it's really going to be affected off of the EM and IR. So if you have the EM, so if we took, let's say, Yella's asteroid ring or something like that, and there was a fair amount of EM or IR being put out of those, then the ship could basically hide in those, because it's creating a large enough ambient signature for the ship to be able to hide in or hide behind, kind of thing. So it will really depend on how we set up our our celestial bodies. But as far as just pure terrain, no.
Okay.
Okay.
So for finding somebody with your radars or whatever, cross section isn't necessarily something that's going to be taken into account. So I guess for now you're not going to be able to just hide behind a rock if your signatures are high. Like you'll always be bleeding out your EM and IR beyond the rock, so people will still be able to scan you essentially.
The masking side as well also applies to ships as well. Like if you have an 890 and a bunch of small ships near it, you might not even be able to target those smaller ships.
I
because
like
the
that
890
idea.
is emitting such a large signature. They won't show up on radar. You won't be able to target them. You won't be able to get a missile lock on them. So you've got to sort of play with the system there. But you get some ways to tailor sort of your radar scope, so you can focus in to do that. You can get closer, you can spread those things apart. So yeah, there's a lot of extra sort of incidental gameplay coming from those systems as well outside, and then obviously environments stack on top of that, so that's all amplified, or whatever the reverse of amplified is, in a gas cloud where everything is harder. So going into a gas cloud, you're no longer the case where you're going to be locked on the enemies targeting. You'll probably lose that lock because they won't be able to actually keep their signals high enough to track you.
You know, the whole being able to tailor your scan thing kind of factors into this whole squadron gameplay that I was talking about before. So using the example they used a second ago with the 890 jump, using that to mask the signatures of these smaller fighters who might be like closer to it, so you can't target or like lock missiles and stuff on it. This will kind of like bring in this gameplay they talked about earlier, where like, then you might need 3 different kinds of terrapin, each with their own like focus, one with an IR focus, one with an EM focus, one with like a CS focus, and then those ships will then be able to then send their scanning data to other ships in the fleet. So if you were just a fighter on your own looking at an 890 jump, you might not necessarily be able to resolve all the other fighters around it. But if you had that scanning ship by you, feeding you that information, then all of a sudden those targets will be resolved to you. So as the enemy fleet, you would then have to focus on those terrapins in order to try and keep those guys from being able to see the rest of your fleet. It complicates things, but in a really good way. And if they can make that work, I think we're going to be in for some really interesting gameplay for sure.
One more question for Todd before we move on. If we did add the Orison shuttle as a player controllable vehicle, Todd, how would you imagine it be used in the verse?
Will it punch above its weight class?
It's super combat heavy. It's troop deploy, kind of thing. But instead of dropping them off, it just crashes.
Ian, what did not make it into the first iteration of Crusader that you still want to implement in some later iteration?
Okay.
For Crusader or Crusader and Orison?
Let's do Crusader and Orison. They only said Crusader, but let's do both.
Okay. Well, let's see. Probably the biggest one is probably movement. See, I always wanted this feeling like it's like an evolving landscape. and we always talked about the idea that it'd be cool to, sometimes you go to Origin and you're just in a cloud, right? Or other times it's nice and open. Obviously, the focus was on the core version of that tech. Movement is obviously, like an adaptation of that tech. So it's a shame it didn't make the first release, but it's something we're looking forward to in the future.
Yeah. So like once the planets and stuff start to revolve around the sun, it'd be cool like when seasons or whatever has been mentioned in chat before, like come around, like maybe perhaps there could be a week or something where Orizin's a bit more cloudy, a bit more Scotland, and then like other times it's more of this open kind of BioShock Infinite heaven style like landscape.
Performance is going to be ongoing, but also that in combined with quality, with crazy,
tropical Scotland.
crazy drops of tech like this. Obviously, it takes years, right? It usually takes years, and it's very rare that people get to see tech so early in development. So quality and performance, seeing those two increases obviously will be coming in soon. Also, lighting and player interaction, more complexity there. So like I said, the analogy I gave for the gas giant, it's the first one. We're going to have many more gas giants in the game, but we'll see this improve. So it's going to hopefully follow a similar sort of like evolution format of what we've been doing with our planets. Yeah.
Regarding the Crusader aspect as well, like right now, Ian had talked about before, like we have kind of a no-fly zone now. Eventually, the idea would be that there's not necessarily a hard deck. It's really kind of what your ship
can take
allows.
Yeah.
How much pressure, atmospheric pressure, is associated with it. And so that's one of the things that I think Dan's team, or I know Dan's team, is currently looking at and starting on. So eventually, that will be released with basically the gas giants.
Okay. Ian, you bring up a really good point I want to touch on about how with Star Citizen, one of the things that separates us from almost every other project out there is how early people tend to see things in the development process, and we show a lot, far more than anybody else, but we still work to hold things back and preserve things when possible. All this quarter, Reddit, Spectrum, YouTube comments have been like, show us the clouds, show us Origin. Like, we've been holding that back specifically for the experience that people had yesterday when ISC went out. It's like if you had seen clouds every single week as they were evolving and stuff like that would be cool in one regard, but we would be sacrificing that wow experience we had yesterday.
Surprises are nice.
We're always,
I agree.
and we wanted to try to preserve that for the PTU. I was hoping PTU would be out so players could experience it there, but schedules happen. But we try to balance that. We're always balancing between showing everything at the earliest possible state, and so there's no discovery for our players anymore, versus our need and want and our desire to maintain open development and show things that week after week. So it's always a delicate balance, and there's always people who wish we would show more and show it earlier, and there's always people that would wish we didn't show and let them discover it in the game. And it's always a balance.
Well, I mean, yeah, we're a community, so like there always gonna be people who want one thing and people who want another. But I'm part of the community who likes surprises, like I feel like there's a magic of like waiting for these surprises and that kind of thing. And whilst I'd like to know more of some stuff, I'm cool with surprises, of course. Thank you, Dart. I mean, not Dart.
Question.
Thank you, Disco.
If we did add the Origin shuttle, if Origin suffers a power failure, will it fall into the planet's core, or will it be fully buoyant? Not only did somebody ask this, it got voted up.
So in ISC, they actually showed the thrusters during the thing.
Who wants to take it?
Basically, it would sink.
It would sink.
That's the idea, is that anything there will sink.
Okay.
That's not terrifying.
Will we see in-game whales flying around Origin?
Not for 314. Basically, they've character art has been working on them, but basically the downstream teams like AI, animation, design still needs time to do what they need to do in order to make them work properly. So it will come out later, but it's not going to be for 3.14.
Yeah, I mean, I think the last thing they want is kind of like that sandworm kind of vibe where oh yeah, you see it, but the gameplay about it, yeah, what about that? Yeah, oh yeah, later. So yeah, when we get it, we get it, I guess.
For everybody that's talking about the audio, we haven't changed the audio levels once during this entire show. There's something going on with the PC. It's altering my audio levels.
Jared's compressor is jank. He doesn't have one.
I can't troubleshoot it live during the show. Sorry, guys. But
I've been trying to make do here. I mean, like, I don't really edit these videos when they go to YouTube, but I've got a mixer. So when Jared starts to peak, I try something.
You can stop mentioning it in chat.
Mic.
We haven't changed it or touched it once during the show. It is varying on its own.
Get a compressor.
We'll look into it afterwards. John, is there going to be a difference in power management, capacitor management between single-seater and multi-crew ships, either in 3.14 or beyond?
Okay.
In 3.14, no. It is the same interaction, managing it by the triangle
by all the ships
between small and large ships.
Okay.
However, it's not like one item across all the ships. Every ship has its own set of capacitors. So for 3.14, we're not letting you change them, but we do want to do that in the future, so you can sort of upgrade them and have some pros and cons. But
I hadn't even thought of this, but yeah, if capacitors are an item, then rather than just having one that like just basically gives you an even kind of like power management or power distribution, like from, like the 33, but like you could get a capacitor that basically is more thruster oriented even when there's an even spread. So when you have more power to thrusters in general, then like it would get even a greater boost from that. That's cool to think about. But I think if you did that, most people will just get like the ones for weapons.
For small and large ships, it is the same system. It does have varying different things based on the size of the ship, just because some ships multi-crew ships tend to have more things on them, so adjusting it will have a different experience, but the core interaction is the same. And down the line, when we have like multi-crew and capital ships, then I would expect those larger ships to not really deal with the capacitors too much, because it'll be a more in-depth engineer turning systems on and off rather than moving a triangle around.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
So yeah, hopefully once we do get the engineering gameplay and stuff in the game, it isn't just going to be a finger on the triangle moving around. Whenever we do get that, and like engineers, doing stuff, overclocking the ships and that kind of stuff, that's the gameplay that I'm kind of looking for, because I've been flying for 5 years. I want to do more stuff on a ship and let somebody else do the flying.
A couple questions related to the new canvas sliced ship HUD here. Will the new canvas slice ship HUD allow players to see the HUDs and MFDs of other crew members on a ship? Right now, other players appear to just be looking at blank or placeholder screens that don't reflect the status of the ship. I know this is not only important for immersion, but it's also really all the machinima makers really want this.
1000%.
Yeah, you should be able to see the HUD, because that is new system.
Building blocks. Nice.
You won't be able to see the MFDs because they are still sort of flash scale form based, so they are turned off intentionally as a performance compromise.
Okay.
When they are converted to building blocks, then we'll look at turning them back on again. They might still cull out at a distance just for optimization reasons. But
if you're behind somebody's shoulder, you'll be able to see them. I'm looking forward to that so much. It's one of those things that they haven't necessarily actually talked about much. The MFDs actually being converted to this whole building blocks thing. But fingers crossed for soon, right?
They're the new building blocks based ones that you'll be able to see not only them, but also being able to use them in sort of from a third person perspective.
Building blocks is the gift that keeps on giving. Will the new HUD allow us to adjust the colors on our own?
No, I don't think so.
Not right now.
Not in 3.14. So in 314 we've put what we call the generic HUD across all the ships, and that has a manufacturer influenced color scheme on it, and I think we've shown on ISC the Aegis styled one and options for the Drake one. So in time, those manufacturer ships will have that sort of style applied to them, and all the other manufacturers will get there. And then once we've done that, then we'll look into customization. I know there's I don't know whether we want to let people pick them all like completely, but I do want to make sure that there is sort of colorblind support for the HUD as a whole. So that level of it will be included at some point.
So I wonder when they do implement this, if they're going to go down the route of making it systemic and diegetic, so you have to go somewhere to buy a color scheme. If they do that, I really hope that you know they don't make a pledge store one. You know, you want this special color scheme, you gotta go buy it for money. But yeah, I think it'd be cool if it was like a systemic item. Although I would settle for just being able to change things, you know, that you want the way you want. You know.
It's for Ian or anybody, I guess. How do you expect Crusader and Orison to evolve through later patches? We've talked about improvements to the clouds, but all these landing zones have grown. Like the first version of Lorville, and then we had the CBD later on. Same with Microtech and stuff. How do we? What's the roadmap look like in general for Crusader and
the cloud map?
Orison? You
want to take it, Todd, or do you want me to go?
I'm fine with taking it. So basically, with V2, we have a fair amount. We have three different shops that we're focusing on, and then we've got a thruster experience. We've got like a whale tour.
Thruster experience.
That, you know, will happen as we roll out.
Okay.
But the whale tour obviously won't be turned on until we actually have the whales. Otherwise, it's going to be a really crappy tour. Then we have things like building interior stuff that some of the Montreal guys are working on, which this will feed into actually all of our landing zones and allow us to have FPS experiences or missions within major landing zones that just aren't, you know, hey, go deliver this fruit, you know, to the person over here kind of thing.
Okay.
But that's really kind of one of the mandates that the Montreal guys are working towards right now.
Yeah. Like a lot of these landing zones are super expansive, so things to do in them would be great. I mean, we've always kind of known, like ever since Levski was a thing, and like maybe over half of the interior of Levski is just like the interior of it, you know, like the fan system and everything else that exists. It has terminals and stuff, but there's no actual gameplay. We've always known, and we've been able to interview developers and stuff over the years, and they've always been like, the long-term goal is that these cities are not just going to be pretty things that take a long time to get out of, you know, just pretty respawn points that just take forever to leave, but for you to actually be able to do stuff in them. Who knows how deep or how rich these are going to be, you know, like it'd be cool just, you know, like at the extreme it'd be nice if like you could just play Star Citizen without ever having to get into a ship and just like do it within the city or whatever and that kind of thing. I don't know if we'll ever get there, but it'd be nice, you know. But yeah, about the thruster experience, I think they touched upon this in ISC as like, you know, they showed like a shot of like one of the platforms firing the thrusters, and then like, you know, it wasn't like a long-term thing, it was just like a and then like it stopped. So because we know Crusader is supposed to be this like kind of whole tourist kind of city almost, or sorry, Orison is supposed to be this tourist city, it wouldn't surprise me if the thruster experience was kind of like, you know, attention, you know, platform B is about to like do a scheduled platform, like, you know, thrust burn thing, and then you have a crowd go watch and go that kind of thing. That'd be cool.
So those to me are kind of how those things will change, because we want the player to be able to go into the islands and be able to go into the bowels of those islands and actually have missions in there, and whether it be repair or, you know, clear out or take over, that kind of stuff. So attack and defend. And then the other thing is that the barges that were created, being able to do combat on those or being able to do missions on those are another thing that we'll be looking at.
Oh, hell yeah.
And as I guess a natural extension of that, has there been any discussion about additional POIs besides Orison on Crusader? Is there anything else on Orison, or did Crusader just build Orison on Crusader and then stop there?
That was it. I doubt it, but we'll see.
So the focus is exclusively on Orison.
Okay.
That's like the
Or
major landing
314.
zone on that gas giant. But what's interesting, right, is we remember what I said right back at the beginning, like building Orison was hard. It came with its own challenges where on previous LZs, you had terrain for the player to land on and get out and, experience the location. Whereas, we didn't really have that option there. So right from the very early stages, we were like, and it's kind of like listening to the community as well. It's like they don't want restricted areas. They want to make those decisions. So right from the get-go, we're like, how do we make this so it is almost exclusively open for the player? So when you look around Orison, the entire stretching of it, I think there's 2 restricted areas, and they're around the commercial area and the industrial platform, just because the social space is right.
Yeah, you don't want to crash people in
stop
there.
griefing, but everything else is open. So to answer your question, it's basically when you look at the lattice work, think about it as like a hierarchical OC system, whereby it's a habitation platform, and then within that habitation platform you have the buildings, and then within those buildings there's rooftop OCs, and there's going to be the building interiors that Tod mentioned before. So the way in which we've built it, if we wanted to create sister platforms or additional platforms or additional locations in the future, those OCs they're already made, right?
So by OCs, I believe he means object containers. So just like little levels that you can just put in.
And and if when people do get to fly around Orison, one of the reads I really wanted is I want to be out on a lonely platform in the middle of nowhere. So it feels like, if you think about how big this guy would be compared to other LZs, like you could be on an industrial platform way out in the distance, and it would feel like you're looking at Orison in the distance, if you know what I mean.
That'd be really cool.
It was an early look we wanted to achieve. So, and answer your question,
like HDMS Edmund is to Lorville. You can see Lorville from Edmund, and it just looks really great from a distance, and you're at somewhere else.
Initially, no, but we've kind of done the hard work to do that setup already.
Yeah, I mean, with Microtech, it was kind of the similar thing. We had New Babbage and we had like the spaceport, but the actual other like outposts and stuff weren't in for the initial release. He's saying that like, the thought process wasn't to make any, but they have, they have the building blocks, as it were, to put things together if they wanted to do so. It would be nice to have little outposts and stuff to do stuff in, like delivery mission like locations and that kind of thing. We might get them, we might not. It'd be cool to see regardless.
I mean, we've talked about things are scattered around Crusader, so that they're on others, complete opposite sides of the planet, so on and so forth. So those are things that we will be looking into and
there we go,
trying out.
From the Pappy's mouth.
But like Ian said, we have the base now, for these things to be built off of.
One thing I didn't say before, Tod gave a very serious answer about what didn't make Orison, but we didn't get the golf course.
Was there meant to be a golf course? Of course there was.
Maybe.
Of course there was.
If it gets enough requests, maybe one day.
No, please, because people are going to expect to play golf. I mean, GTA has golf, but give us the arcade, CIG, before you want to make a golf course. Damn it!
I'll happily sacrifice the shuttle for the golf course.
I was gonna say I didn't do that one. That wasn't on me. John, with all the work that's gone into revamping the radar, the scanning, the ping and stuff like this, does any of that affect? Does any of that get us closer to having the improved abilities of ships like the Terrapin or the Carrack and stuff like that? Is this a step forward to that, or is this completely separate, divorced from that?
So I missed the question there. Sorry.
The ping and stuff like this. Is John, with all the work that's gone into revamping the radar, the scanning, the ping and stuff like this, does any of that affect? Does any of that get us closer to having the improved abilities of ships like the Terrapin or the Carrack and stuff like that? Is this a step forward to that, or is this completely separate, divorced from that?
So I remember this question from the actual thing. I think he's asked it in a kind of roundabout way, but let's see if we get the answer that I'm expecting.
I'd say it's a step towards it. In 314, we're not specifically focusing on those ships having their superior radar and scanning abilities. Our focus is getting all the ships working to a state where we're happy with this new system.
Yeah.
And from then on, we will start tailoring those ships to it. Because I think myself and everyone would probably be happy to have everything working to a good standard rather than a few ships being significantly overpowered and some poor horn owner might not be able to scan anything at all because we missed it. So
yeah,
we're doing the big wide pass, like Todd said. We've done our first pass on all the systems last week, and every 3 or 4 days we're sort of doing the next iterative pass based on internal and Evocati feedback on each of those big systems. So like one day we might have the next set of tunings for the missiles GUI, and the next day might be the armor and health. The next day is the scanning values. So it's coming thick and fast.
So I think the question from the actual like Spectrum post was kind of more geared towards how would things like the Terrapin, so the Terrapin is supposed to be like a scanning recon ship. How would this ship that's supposed to be like designed to be that, how would it differ from like another scanning ship, or sorry, another ship of the same size class? Like, you know, how would its scanning ability like differ? So I think the question was more towards the direction that would be going, as opposed to like would we be seeing it, you know, like in 314. So sadly we didn't get any new information, but you know, we got what we've got.
Todd, I don't know if you'll have anything for us, but it's come up too often in chat for me to ignore it. Positional desync. It's been a pretty major problem for a while now, but now for
I can't believe he actually asked this question, but yeah, desync has been a massive issue. So we'll see if Todd has anything to say about
313.
it.
Yeah. I don't know if Xenothreats seem to exacerbate it or not. What's going
We thought it did, but then DDoS went away, and it's still been bad
on there, and what hope, if any, do we have that some of this might be resolved in 314?
I mean, part of it is basically server frame rate, and then part of it is just how much entity counts I think we have and all this stuff. So from my standpoint, I think Clive and his team have constantly been trying to fix those types of things, and then same with Gordon and his team from an actor side. So this is something that's we know is plaguing our game, and we know that it in particular was Xenothreat and everything like the big capital ships. It exacerbates it. So obviously with Ninetales, it's a little bit smaller and doesn't have as many of the big capital ships in it. So it's for CIG, I view this as one of our top priorities to try to fix and to constantly strive to make sure that the combat and basically the overall player experience when running around is smooth and solid. So you know, I can tell you that Chris would say the same thing, Aaron would say the same thing. This is like, we don't joke around with this. We do constantly try to improve this.
Well, I mean, well, obviously they want their game to work, right? It's one of those things where it exists. It's a big, pervasive problem right now that makes so that people who are playing the game for the first time and that kind of thing do not get the experience that they were, perhaps were, expecting and that kind of thing. And I think that it's one of those things that, again, he mentioned people like Clive Johnson, the lead network designer and that kind of thing, that are working towards fixing, but it's one of those things where they're working towards a system to fix it as opposed to working on what is the issue directly because of the scope and scale of the universe and that kind of thing. So hopefully we'll get some fixes to it. We can't really expect much from what we currently have at the moment until we get server meshing, so that multiple different servers will be able to take the strain from each other, as opposed to having just the one server per 50 player server or whatever within one set of Stanton system planets and stuff, servicing everything. Once that happens, hopefully a lot of this issue, a lot of this the stuff that we suffer and we're experiencing now will be alleviated. But until then, I mean, as Todd says, they know it's an issue. It's one of those things where, yeah, it's an issue, it sucks, but it's going to be a waiting game for us, I feel.
Yeah, it's like with the AI. Like I've seen some really cool AI behaviors, locally, internally.
Exactly. Like locally, of course, if Disco goes to one of the offices and stands behind somebody working on AI, they've talked about AI having different kinds of skill sets, moods, all this stuff. But even if it was in Star Citizen, you would never know, because the AI stand there for 10 seconds most of the time, because the server is like, oh wait, 1 second, before we let that AI do that thing, I gotta let this bartender make this guy's drink, there's too much happening right now, and the servers need this is why we need server meshing,
Internally on in development, and then it gets into the live, and the I don't know, partially for the reason you mentioned earlier with the streaming and out in the missing persistence, but also just the server tick rate. Yeah, It's just we can't stop developing. We have to keep building the game. While this is being worked on by the dedicated teams who are working on this. I know in the chats or in comments there's often this perception that you can only work on one thing at a time, and everybody should be working on this. It's like, Ian, you should be working on server desync. What are you doing? You environment art director. It's like, why aren't you working on server desync? It's like we still need to be developing the game and building our systems and adding new features to the game, but it can be challenging when we want this fixed as much as the players do. I don't think that's
Yeah, it's the biggest shortcoming of the game, but obviously it is just the nature of it, hopefully they'll fix it.
Big mystery. All right, we
sooner than later.
are almost out of time. Ian, what's going on with Port Olisar? It's like the number two
Nothing
question
at
in the
all.
chat. The number two question
Nothing
in chat
at
has
all.
been about Port Olisar.
Nothing at all.
People want it to be moved. People want it to be a crashed derelict.
Yeah, people wanted to be destroyed. They were like, yo, just kill this thing. It's
planet.
done.
What? I think there's one
Okay.
person that wants it to go away.
Okay. Port Olisar has a special place in my heart. We built it back in the day. Whatever we do with it will be fitting. It's just not going to disappear. I'll just leave it there.
Yeah, so again, I believe John Crewe touched upon what will be happening with Port Olisar. A lot of people have it in their mind that Port Olisar is going to be destroyed or something. You talk to enough people, and I don't know where. I mean, I think I know where it came from. They once showed off this tech demo for render to texture, where you can see a sign, and all of a sudden that sign shows you some information. And we actually had that working in game for Invictus when it was showing you the different flight times and stuff for the battleships, and when you can go ahead and see them on tour and that kind of thing. But with the tech demo in that one Star Citizen, Inside Star Citizen, or whatever they called it back then, around the verse, when they showed it back then, it was warning, Vandal attack, and then they had a few of the Vandal ships they were working on at the time show up at Port Olisar, and then from there people were like, oh my god, Port Olisar is going to blow up, and it's kind of been just this thing. Everybody thinks PO is going to blow up, but they've never ever even reference to it. It's just something that people have been thinking about. And with, of course, Orison and Crusader coming in, they were like, okay, what about Port Olisar? So one of the developers, Luke Presley, talked about what would happen with it. Essentially, what's going to be happening down the line is that Port Olisar will have hangars, so that people won't just be able to blow up, people who are on pads. Because right now, of all the landing zones in Star Citizen, even the ones, like at Everest Harbor and, all the ones around the planets, it's basically like, a serving dish for anybody who wants to grief a ship or just ram into a pad. You see everything there. So when they do go ahead and they address Port Olisar, it's not going to be being removed on the ArcStar map. Port Olisar is there, it is a thing, but it'll likely be changed so that gameplay wise, so that just like as a thing for you, for convenience sake and that kind of thing, it'll evolve to be better, because it should be better.
All right.
So how about that Crusader shuttle, John?
Yes. Now, what would it
Crusader
take
shuttle?
to actually? No, what would it take to get it?
You only
in?
have one of them, Olisar or that shuttle.
I think you should just do a flying Alisar.
A player-controlled Olisar.
Just a cockpit in there.
Give me my Deep Space Nine. Don't joke about that. Give me my Deep Space Nine.
Yeah.
All right. Actually, let's see. Did Tod Pappy get a crime stat for stealing that parking meter behind him?
Nope.
Is that what
bought
it
it.
is?
You bought a parking meter?
Why?
Yeah, it's a good talking piece. Well, and
Fair.
then my wife's got all of her Lego stuff as well, so.
We've got a couple here. We got a couple more Ninetales
Okay.
lockdown questions. So, will the Ninetales phases run on all servers simultaneously, like at the same time, or will each have its own scenario? I know there's been a lot of comments I've seen about folks in Australia or folks outside the Pacific time zones or the Austin time zones. Like, will these ever run in times that I can play?
Well,
and
can
stuff
we?
like that.
I mean, as far as I know, they're running across all servers simultaneously.
Yeah, so with the Tony Z thing, he basically showed how that would work with servers, and in the future how that would work with phased like gameplay when we have that one singular one singular shard. It should all be working simultaneously.
And then basically it does have a time clock that it just reoccurs. And so, I mean, ideally, and I think it reoccurs, usually we look at something every 2 to 3 hours or something like that. So we want to make sure that it does reoccur multiple times throughout the day, because technically we think of our days in game as basically 3 to 4 hours. I think it's 3 hours that we look as, kind of a 24-hour period. So, we want to make sure that all players can experience this across the board.
Yeah,
No
because like with the Ninetales with the Xenothreat one that they had before, the timing and the spacing of that was kind of odd. So because it was like, one phase would be during the weekday and then one phase will be in the weekend. And so if you didn't have that kind of, time, you wouldn't be able to experience everything. So whatever they do with this, I do hope that they've learned from those things, and these future events will be a little bit more, I guess, lenient when it comes to time.
Where they're at within the planet right now.
Gotcha. That's not you saying that this will run every single day
Will it?
of the quarter or whatever.
No.
It's just that
No.
on the days when it does run,
Correct.
it should cycle through.
Yeah, that makes more sense. That's good.
People asking about Pico balls. I don't know if Ian even knows about the Pico balls. That was something I worked out with Eddie. Ian, do you know about the Pico balls?
What about them?
Do you know where they're at?
I know they're in.
Are they?
Okay.
So this is validation for Disco, which is why he's giving like the camera that Disco's glare, because basically Disco mentioned a couple weeks ago that the Pico balls were in. So for those that don't know what a Pico ball is, look directly to Disco's left. So his right hand side, there's like a little Pico ball thing, right? about like a month ago, Disco was like, oh yeah, the Pico Balls are in this Easter egg in the game. It's like a 3D model of that Pico Ball behind him. And when he said that, somebody came to the subreddit saying that, you know, I've data mined the entire game and this thing just doesn't exist. So it turns out that it does, and apparently it's in the game somewhere. And so, I mean, when it comes to how like data mining works for Star Citizen, like not all the assets are just there. When you get like a constellation, it's not like a fully built constellation. You essentially have to piece things together. So maybe perhaps the Pico Ball exists as many different kinds of assets that need to be pieced together. So who knows? Apparently they're in. So if anybody wants to go on like a massive exploration tour, apparently there are 7 Pico Balls, like the Dragon Balls, and they're about somewhere. So maybe you can find them.
People still haven't found them. I've been waiting patiently.
He has been.
They're in.
All right.
Did we get that one on that one on Origin for you? Did we get that in? The one just for you?
Nick was working on it, but he went on paternity, so I don't know.
So there might be a Pico Ball in Orison. So I think maybe there might be one in every major landing zone then in that case.
All right, guys, that's it. That's our show. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to do this. I have to give a little extra special thank you for John Crewe, because he was a last-minute add-in there. You know, so thank you for moving your schedule around and jumping in. There are people I can count on in this place, and these are 3 of my absolute favorites. ISC is on hiatus, everybody. We're off. We're not back again until July 20-something or other. So you can just keep watching the old episodes over and over again if you want. We'll be back next Friday with an episode of Calling All Devs with core gameplay director Richard Tyrer. We're going to talk all about player healing and hacking and all kinds of stuff coming in.
Next week is going to be so good.
So stay tuned for that. And of course, remember to keep checking up on the robertsspaceindustries.com website. That's because that's where all the information about when 314 moves to PTU and what wave and when you can get in, and you can start flying around Orison for yourself, because it is quite a treat. So Ian, Todd, John, thank you so much. I'm Jared. I'll talk to you later, everybody. See ya.
All right. Freaking epic. So Ian Leyland is one of those developers who's like just really excitable and just knows his stuff, and of course is really close to the game's development. And the last time we saw Ian Leyland, he was actually there with Chris Roberts to talk about Death of a Spaceman and where things were planned on going. So next week, he's actually going to be there talking with Disco Lando all about 315's healing process and that kind of thing, and what we're going to be seeing and what to expect for the future. We're several months now down the line, so it's just going to be a very interesting one, an eye-opening one to hear. So yeah. Anyway, guys, for those who have been watching with us on Twitch, don't go anywhere. We're still going to be doing more stream stuff. But for those who have been with us the entire time, watching this with us on YouTube, well, thank you so much for sticking around this far. If you liked what you've seen so far, if you'd like the discussion, then please feel free to like and subscribe this video on YouTube. Comment down below if you want to. And we'll see you in the next one. Also, feel free to also follow us on twitch.tv/Myre. You can join the conversation live with us every single time we do this. We stream pretty much every single day. All right, so until then, guys, thank you once again for watching. And as always, be good.